I was born to Charlotte and Bert Reynolds on the 24th of April in 1935. My siblings are Ron, who is 5 years older than me, and then brother Ken, brother Gene, sister Betty, Bob, and Lynn. I'm not sure what year Dad came over. There's not really record. Around 1920, I think. Mom came over in 1930. They were married in England, and they came over here. And for a few years, they had to move in with a couple of bachelors' uncles that wasn't very compatible, I guess. But then they built their own place in 1932, probably, I guess, up north and west where Little West School is now, where Dave lives now. Well, I don't remember a lot about my preschool years, but a little bit. I remember the old house. It was only probably about 18 by 24. We lived in it with Mom and Dad, one bedroom, pantry, and a front room about the size of this one, the hands, I guess. And there was a cook stove in it and a kind of a cot where brother and I slept. And I don't believe we survived in that for, quite a few years, till 1942, I guess. I don't remember a lot about the earlier years because, well, I was just too young, but I remember lots of snow. I remember going out with Dad out to the old log barn in the wintertime to milk cows and feed horses. And the old house was, of course, no power. It's heated with an old wood stove and a heater, but you had to stoke up every night. And I think then in about 1942, I was supposed to start grade 2, and I wouldn't, or grade 1. And I wouldn't do correspondence like Brother Ron did. He was very studious and he would do his correspondence, so I wouldn't sit down and learn any of that stuff. So we had to finally move. We changed places with the uncles who were living south of Senate, and then we went to Zentner School from there. I went to Zentner School from grade 1 then from 1942. Then in 1946 they moved the school up to Little West, and then we went back there. While I was in Zentner School, I went to school with there was one Zentner boy, and there was Paul kids, and there was Messmer kids, and there was Wagner kids, and there was Ross kids, and there was Arnold kids. And I was just talking about that to my brother this morning. Every one of them places, there's not even a building left anymore except for about 1 or 2. They're just all gone. There's hardly anybody even remembers most of those families even. So then I started school there in 46. Started there in grade 1, and we went there till 46 when the school was built at Little West. But I think maybe I went to Senate for a little while there. And the school closed about in 1945, I guess. I went to the Senate school in 46, and then Little West must have started in the fall of 46 or 47. Went to school there with Sanderson kids, Jones kids, Eddie Hagel, Glenn West. It wasn't a very big school. I think Irma Wilson was our first teacher, I guess. And I only went there till grade 9, and then I went farming. But in 1950, I guess when I was 16, I did work for Roy and Jim Patterson, that summer stacked square bales, I guess. And then that fall I come home and helped with harvest, and I never left after that. Stayed there for a good many years, I guess. Finally in 1956, got married to Marlene Graham, who was a sitter in Little West there. We got married in 1956, I guess, and raised a family of 4 boys. And then we decided to split our ways about 15 years after we were married, I guess. And then I was alone with the kids for a few years. Married Donna Jones, and we were married had a son, Dave, and now he's taken over the farm now. And before that we adopted 2 girls who were put them both through university. They're both well educated now and working at their chosen professions.
You farmed the same land from the time you started till now and just added to it?
Yeah, I farmed all of that land that Dad had, and then when my uncles retired, we farmed that land. And then I kind of farmed with Ken there for years. And then in 1965, I guess it was, we bought the Dennis place, farmed that with Ken until he sold out, which I'm not sure exactly what year that was. And then in about 1985, we sold that original place down there by Leismeister where my uncles lived. We ended up owning that. Then we sold that to Peter and Tony Leismeister, and then we bought Leo Jones's. Boys are still farming that today.
And did you straight farm, or did you raise cattle too?
No, we run quite a few cows and a bit of a feedlot there for quite a few years. In fact, we fed over 400 head of cows there for a few winters, and then I think we acquired land in the PFRA and rights and co-op pasture. And over the years I was on, PF boards and Council of the Rink board and Council Curl and Rink, and Council Hall board, Council Senior Citizens board.
Tell us about the feedlot bill and the breed you had in it, and the diseases you had to fight and...
Okay. I think back in about 72, I guess we quite a few of us took AI courses in town here, and we went through the AI bit and tried exotic cattle, and they were okay in the feedlot. We fed just about whatever we had. We had mostly Herefords at that time of our own, but we always bought a few. We always come down to console sales here and bought them. We always got pretty well bought what we could get a bargain, because we were feeding them up to finish, and we would all grade, and we fed, well, 400 to 500 head there for not a lot of years. I guess probably for 10 years, so we did that. Then the cows, they gradually, we've tried the exotics, and they didn't pan out that good. Then we went back to Hereford, and since then they've probably a little Hereford in yet, but we're mostly black and red Anguses now. The farm there, they don't fatten them anymore, but they still do winter the calves, and they sell them to a guy that he sells natural beef, so the boys don't do any, well, they do vaccinate, but no Ralligro or no antibiotics in them.
Why do you think that red and black Angus have got to be so predominant?
I know why the black Angus got so predominant for us, because there was a feedlot we used to sell them to in Alberta, and he said one year, if you got a red cow with a white face, don't send it to me. So he really didn't give us any choice. It was the buyers that told us where we were going.
I wonder why.
I don't know. They were into that marbled beef, I guess, and I guess all feedlots weren't that way, because they're still red and white faced cattle, but he was buying our cattle and he didn't want them, so that just pretty well forced us to change, or else we had to go somewhere else.
Did you have trouble with disease in the feedlot, or was it?
Well, you always had a little bit of trouble, but nothing very serious. I don't think some years we would lose one or two, but I think we always kept our loss down to, well, probably 2% or something like that, which I think is kind of, some years probably only 0.5%, other years maybe up to 3%, but we never had a lot of trouble with disease. We had pneumonia, but the odd year, not that often, we'd have to take the whole bunch and just put them through and give them a shot of long-acting antibiotics. And we usually would start feeding them pretty heavy through the winter sometime in January, and probably by June they were gone. They were 1,100 to 1,300 pounds, so we pushed them pretty hard, but we made good money there for a few years doing it, but then a lot of things changed. They wanted us to contract them, and we tried contracting them, but that didn't work all that good for us, because they wanted them a certain way at a certain time and a certain everything, and it just didn't. You didn't want to comply with all these things, so we kind of got away from it. When
you were AIing, what breeds did you use?
When we were experimenting with everything. We tried, well, Simmental. Mostly Simmental, the other breeds, but what we did like when we were AIing were the Simmental crosses. Then when we had some got out of them, we still had Simmental cows, and we really like crossing them with the red Angus. They still make a good cross. In fact, if we could still get Simmental cross red Angus cows, I think we would like to have them.
When you were a kid or a young man, what were some of the things you did for entertainment?
Well, in my really younger days, we were so far apart, and where we lived there was mostly bachelors. There was not little kids much to play with that were very close. But we played lots of ball, and then they played a lot of shinny hockey on the lakes. And the Sandersons always had a rink that their dad made for them. We used to go over there to skate, and then after that we played a little ball in leagues and hockey, and then I've curled continuously since 1958, I guess, for 50 how many years.
Lots of dances.
Lots of dances, yeah. Done lots of dancing.
When was the rink first built in Console, and what was it like?
The rink was a centennial project that was built in, I think it was finished in 1968. There was a lot of kids, a lot of minor hockey back then, and I don't think there was up to about 70 girls figure skating at that time. I should just mention who the original, as well as I remember, the original rink board that got it started was Raymond Sterling, Leo Jones, Joe Geiger, Victor Fondrick, myself, Ken Wagner, and I'm probably missing somebody, but I know that was some of the main ones that were involved. Raymond Sterling was secretary for a good many years, and then Joe Geiger took it over, and I forget who the chairman was at that time, maybe Leo Jones. And I don't remember the curling rink. No, it started in 1958. That's the first year they curled, in 1958. I got in an argument about that, so I argued with Cliff Smith, and he knew when it had started, because that was the year Kit Sterling died, and they had to drive up to the cemetery and look at the date on her gravestone. It was either 58 or 59.
And that's when they started the ring?
That was the first year they curled in it, yeah. That was years after that they put the artificial ice in 1960 something.
Tell us about your kids and what they're doing and where they're at.
But you can also think of just some stories too.
My kids are pretty well traveled over well, not too far away actually. Wynn is the oldest one. He's in the East End. He's in construction. He's married to Lori. She was Lori Cook, and they've been married for over 25 years, which is hard to believe. And Jerry, of course, he's on the farm, part of the farm. Brett, he works for CPR. He's in Gull Lake. And Neil, he's in Calgary with two daughters and a son. Or he had two daughters. He lost one daughter to cancer when she was only 12 years old. And his second daughter, she's 26, and she's fighting cancer right now. Where'd I get to?
Neil.
Neil. And then April and Lee, we adopted those two Métis girls, and they both got good educations. April, she's done in Virginia. She's a nurse practitioner. I was down to visit her this fall. And Lee is in Saskatoon. And Dave, he lives where I did live on the farm. He's a farmer, rancher, handyman, truck driver, whatever, trying to make a buck. And Jerry and married to Colleen, and she just retired from teaching this last summer, and Dave is married to Tammy, and she's still teaching. They have two kids. After Dawn and I split, there were still kids at home, so I had kids in school for 36 years. I don't know if that's a record or not, but it's a long time. And there were still kids in school after Donna left. Well, just Dave, I guess. But then I farmed there for a few years by myself, and then eventually when we bought Leo and Irene's place, and Dave and Tammy got married, they wanted my home place, so I moved over and I lived in Leo and Irene's trailer where they were for a few years till Shirley and I got married, 2005, I guess.
Can you tell us some of the changes you've seen in farming since you started?
About 46, then we went. Dad finally bought a tractor. Before that, he farmed with horses. We had one of the first thrash machines in the country. I can remember thrashing with the old thrash machine. We used to stack thrash bales, bundles, and stacks, and I hauled grain to Goverlock when I was 15 years old with a 1950 Dodge truck. I remember that a year before I had my driver's license. Well, my earliest memories are our dad farmed with two horses mostly, I guess, and an old 1530 International tractor that he shared with his uncles. It had the lugs and steel wheels. I used to move it back and forth 11 miles. I don't know, it must have took him all day. Then in 1946, he bought a Alice Chalmers tractor that was on rubber, and then that's what he farmed with, a 6-foot one-way and a 12-foot press drill, I think. And he only farmed probably 200 acres, I guess. And then from then he advanced to a Cockshot 40, which he farmed with for, well, that was about the time I started helping to farm, I guess. And farmed with that. We had finally advanced to probably a 15-foot discer. And I think our first combine we bought in about 49 or 40, maybe 50 or 51. 52 was a real big crop. I remember we had a good crop then and had to hire some help to combine it. And then as the years went by, we got a little bit bigger and bigger tractors. And now, of course, the boys are farming with a tractor that's damn near 300 horsepower and pulling 40 feet. But they've all got into chemical anymore. There's hardly any summer fall done, mostly all chemical farming. And I don't think my family may be farming anymore, but man, the farms are getting so big anymore. They talk about these guys just farming 20,000 acres, and my God, I don't know how they keep up to it or even know what they own for land. But even around here, there's guys farming 6,000, 7,000 acres, and the grain handling has changed so much. We don't have an elevator now. Everything has got to be. We don't have an elevator anymore or a wheat board. Or a wheat pool. My dad would turn over in his grave if he knew there was no more wheat board, no more wheat pool, and everything had to be trucked somewhere to Maple Creek or beyond. And there's so many different crops anywhere, like canola and peas and chickpeas and carrion or whatever it is, and just getting into different stuff than that too.
What was the machine that you thought made the biggest change in your life?
Oh, I guess the biggest change in my life was probably just the tractor. remember Dad getting up in the morning and going and getting the horses in and then harnessing, and then he'd come in for breakfast. And then he'd go out till maybe 10 o'clock and then come in and said the horses had to have a rest, and then he'd go back out again till noon. And then if it got hot in the afternoon, he would quit for a while and go back out in the evening. And I think the tractor, it could just go. And I think probably when the tractors came in was probably the biggest change that I saw.
Vehicles in general, too.
Vehicles, first vehicle I can remember Dad having was I don't know what it was an old square back thing, and it was an old Pontiac or Chev, I think. And the road to town was just like it was just a wagon trail that we started driving in, and it was very rarely they ever went to town, maybe once a week, or not even to get the mail. In the wintertime, maybe twice in the winter with a sleigh. And I remember one thing in the winter, because there was no place to shop for kids' clothes, and I remember in the wintertime sometime he'd bring a great big parcel from Army and Navy, and that's where all our kids' overshoes and parka coats and coveralls and all that stuff, it all came from the Army and Navy back then, because there's no running to Medicine to buy clothes. And I remember us kids always looked forward to our new pants and our new socks that were coming from Army and Navy.
And the 4-buckle overshoes.
The 4-buckle overshoes. We went from that vehicle. I remember he had a 42 coupe Chev. We drove that for quite a while. And then in about 1948, he brought I don't know why, I think it was because he was an Englishman. He got an English Chev, or an English prefect. It wasn't a Chev. It was a small car. It had no heater in it. Oh, what a pile of junk that was. And then in 1950, he bought a 4-door Pontiac. Well, that was, it was a Plymouth. And then he went from the 57 Plymouth. And we drove them cars till they wore them out, I guess. Then after about that time, then I started buying my own vehicles. I guess I had 72 Dodge truck, I guess. I think Dad went to some kind of a small Chev after that. And they drove that for years. I changed a few times since then, quite a few times.
Was Senate your main town, and what was it like? What was there?
Senate was our main town. There was for a while there was 2 grocery stores. There was a little co-op store that had a credit union in it, and there was Cameron's store. Well, it was Finkel's at first, and there was a hardware store too. And then Finkel quit, and then Paul Cameron bought that store. Co-op eventually closed, and the hardware run after that was Paul's dad. And eventually they moved it all into one store, and they operated there for many, many years. And now the Senate, there's absolutely nothing left there. But we done part of our business too in Govanlock, because we used to go by Govanlock, and Andy McRae was there, and you always stopped to see Andy. And we hauled some of our grain to Govanlock. So there was an elevator there. There was 2 elevators in Senate, and there was, well, we never come over to Council with grain, but there was 2 elevators here, different grain companies. And now there's nothing there except the dance hall in Govanlock, and there's nothing at all in Senate. And well, Council has changed. I remember 2 stores in here. They weren't co-op. They were both privately owned at that time, and they both had gas pumps, and they both had big machining agencies. You could buy new vehicles, new tractors, new everything from, well, Council Service Station. There was Warren Seifert Dad, and then the grocery store was, well, when I remember it was Chuck Lightfoot's, but it was earlier than that, and I can remember across the street was Dave Bartlett's when I remember it, and then they built a little piece on it, and it was actually a Robinson store, and Dorothy May run that. Council here, there was 2 cafes at that time too, and another cafe, and then the biggest cafe burnt down on 17th of March in 1957.
Why do you think Council survived and Senate and Govanlock didn't?
But I think probably the reason that part of the reason that Council survived was it was more of a central point, and on account of the school. I think all the kids were coming here for school, because there was over 100 kids when my kids were going here. Now they're down to about 60, I guess, or between 60 and 70, I guess. But I think the school was a big thing.
And the pub?
And the pub? Oh yeah, the pub.
Because there wasn't a bar in either Govanlock or Senate, was there?
No, not really. No, there was a Chinaman in Senate, Charlie Wing. He done a little bootlegging, I think, and he was a little poker den in the back. I remember in wartime, I don't know, you couldn't buy chocolate bars any place, but we used to walk to town on Tuesday mornings, because the train came in, and he would get a case of chocolate bars, and it was the only damn place you could buy a chocolate bar. That was in the war years. So we would walk to town for a chocolate bar. Yeah.
How many miles was
I
that?
think it was a mile and a half was all at that time, because we were living south there. But yeah, the wire was so much different than that. But I don't know. I I couldn't get in the bar till I was 21. Till I was 21, imagine. But it was a kind of, well, especially Saturday nights when I can remember, it was if you didn't get in early, you couldn't even get a place to sit down. We used to come in Saturday nights, and there was Saturday night shows. The kids would go to the show, and we'd go to the bar till they came out of the show, and then they'd be tapping on the door, and then you'd give them a bag of chips, and then you'd stay a little longer, and then they had to go home. But it was a busy place, the bar, yeah.
Well, there was for a long time the women couldn't go in the bar, though, could they?
No, not when I first went in the bar. I don't know what year the women could start going in, but I remember being in the bar the first day the women could go in, and I guess Vic Fondrick had it then, and every woman got a free glass of champagne. I bet you the glass is probably still in the cupboard at home.
So I guess the jukebox would be playing, would it?
Yeah, I don't think there was a jukebox in there. There were so many people in there, so many people talking. I don't think you had ever heard a jukebox. It was pretty rowdy back then, especially before the women came in. But that was the best you could have in the world, was when the women came in. It kind of quieted down a little bit. But when it first came in, the women were on one side and the men were on the other side. They weren't all, wasn't all together like it is now, but the women were on the west side and the men were on the east side.
Was there a partition between?
No partition. It was just a imaginary line, I guess, that you weren't supposed to cross. But just some of the sports that, well, I took part in some of them, but back then there was we had pretty good hockey in Council here, and there used to be kind of scruff hockey in some of the other towns. They used to go up to Battle Creek to play hockey. But I remember in baseball, there was a baseball team in Mary Flat, there was a baseball team in Gouverneur, there was a baseball team in Council, there was a baseball team in Vidora, there was a baseball team in Robsart, and they used to have, about every Sunday you went to a ball game somewhere. Everybody had tournaments, and they brought their kids, and there was always a booth at all the ball grounds, and Sunday thing that everybody did. Hockey, when they started playing hockey, and I think it was kind of organized, and they had a league too, but it was open hockey down here where Kissel Coulee is now. That's where we started skating, and there was hockey games. I think there were organized hockey games there. And like I said, there was a curling rink here and a curling rink in Robsart. Ours started in '58, I guess, and it has slowly slowed down. There was over 50 or 60 teams, and now we're down to 10 or 12. I guess, and just not enough people anymore.
Robsart never ever had artificial ice, though, did they?
No, Robsart never had artificial ice, and I think they put artificial ice in Council sometime in the '60s. I'm not just sure what year, but.
What do you see as a future for Council? Do you think it's going to be able to stay alive?
Oh, I think Council will stay here as long as they keep a school, and there's lots of little kids in Council. And thank goodness for a bit of the oil industry. It really helps. It's a lot of local people are employed through oil, and if it wasn't for oil, it would be hard on Council. But there's a lot of young people that are involved with the oil industry, and then there's a lot of businesses comes to town on account of oil. And there is one sad thing though. A lot of the land that is being sold by either corporates that don't come here and farm it, and it's rented to somebody else, or else it's somebody from Alberta that. They farm it, but they never live here. They just go back, and it's hard on the population. It's actually worse than having Hutter rates coming by, because it's just absentee ownership, but it's really hurting the country.
Do you remember when the gas ice plant started and how it got started?
I remember it, but I really don't remember much about it. In about 50 something. I remember they thought it was going to be a boom for Council, and they were going to blacktop the road down there, and they were going to ship how many carloads out, but it just kind of, I don't know, something happened to it, or something happened to the money, or something happened. Then there was going to be a second boom here, and they put a whole bunch of buildings down there, and then, I don't know, it was rumored that it was going to do great things, and then it fizzled out. The buildings and tanks are still there, but I don't know.
Do you think they'll ever get it running? Doing whatever it's supposed to do?
Well, now I don't know for sure, but I think maybe they are still using some of that CO2 gas down there to recapture some oil. I think they're forcing it down some holes to bring oil up. I'm not sure about this, but I think so. But they've never shipped anything out of there that I know of, no. We never had any gas wells up in our part of that northwest of town. There isn't very much up there, but a lot of activity south there has been in the past, but not much activity lately, although there's producers down there, and they're still trucking oil out.
What was the railroad like when you were young? Like, was it a main train?
When I was a kid, everything came in on the train, all right, and we were kids, we used to put pennies on the railroad track to see how they flattened out. You did too, eh? But everything came in on the train and mail. They used to drop the water off for, like, if there was no water in it. I know there was a big cistern there for the CPR crew, and they would drop water, and all the groceries come, and the mail came. I remember Dad even had a pig shipped in on the train. Yeah, everything coming, and every town had a CPR crew. Also had a station agent, and we didn't in Senate, but the Governlock had a station agent for heavy freight, and they had freight sheds for heavy freight. And there was a train. There was 3 trains a week, I guess, and then there was the odd special train come through if it was picking up grain or something. But yeah, everything went. Well, we shipped cream and eggs went on the train. Shipped cattle. Most of the cattle went on trains. Then there used to be stockyards in Governlock, Senate, then Council all had stockyards. Alto and West, they called Governlock. They had a big set of stockyards. A lot of cattle went up there, but I don't think there was ever very many went out of Senate. But there was a lot went out of Council because they started the sail ring here and a lot of cattle. But most of them went up on the rail way back when they started.
What do you think the future is for farming and cattle? What do you think there will change in what we know now?
Well, I think the way things are going, the farmers are going to get bigger. I think it's going to be a lot of corporate farms. I think that's where we're going. Hate to see it, but I think it's going to be a lot of corporate farms. And cattle, and see, it seems like these feedlots are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And there'll always be ranches that run 100 or 200 head, I think. But as far as the feedlots going, that's all going to the big guys, the big corporations. The little feedlots are almost all gone now, I think.
Do you think that cattle can stay at the price they are this year, though?
Oh, yeah, I think they're going to have to stay. When you got to pay $80,000 for a truck, them cattle better stay up to that price they are. And I think they'll stay for a good long time. The herd has got to rebuild, and everybody's moving heifers and dry cows because they don't want to keep them. The price is so good. So I don't know how the herd is going to rebuild very fast. As long as the prices are so high, nobody's going to retain anything any more than they have to. So that's my prediction. It's probably as good as anybody else's.